Are the Stormcloaks racist? The answer may shock you. No, they are not racist. What's up guys, Thorn here, and today I'd like to do something a little different for my channel. This new series will focus less on cracking jokes every 6 seconds, and focusing more on well thought out, heavily scripted, intellectual, and serious story analysis. So for my existing subscribers, all 7 of you, if you're subscribed to my channel for my jokes and aren't interested in any thought-provoking, serious story analysis, then I recommend you turn back now. You have been warned. For those of you who are playing Skyrim for the first time, when contemplating which army to join in the Civil War, the most common argument you get from Skyrim veterans for why you should not join the Stormcloaks is because the Stormcloaks are racist. This is an important topic to discuss, because it is the only thing stopping the Stormcloaks from having buttloads of support for their cause. Stormcloak haters don't seem to offer anything else to attack the Stormcloaks with, other than their alleged racism, either because they don't have anything else to attack the Stormcloaks with, or because they feel that this racism is all they need to present the Stormcloaks as evil. So if the Stormcloaks are not racist, and any accusations of racism against the Stormcloaks can be proven to be false, then the Stormcloaks become altruistic freedom fighters fighting for their homeland, with no evils or vices holding them back. So let's tackle this important question. Are the Stormcloaks racist? Well, when we ask that, we are essentially asking 2 questions in one. First, does the Stormcloak Army advance a pro-Nord racist agenda? And second, is Ulfric Stormcloak himself racist? I would like to start with the first question, since answering yes to the question of whether the Stormcloak Army advances a racist agenda automatically makes Ulfric Stormcloak personally racist, but a finding of Ulfric's personal racism does not necessarily mean that his Civil War agenda is motivated by racial tensions. For example, in the real world, the German Nazi Party's anti-Semitic propaganda necessarily means that Adolf Hitler was an anti-Semite. But Donald Trump's self-admitted hatred of Mexican people does not necessarily mean that the United States Department of Defense is dedicated to a racist agenda. Now, before we continue, I want to nip this in the bud right now and draw this line in the sand so there is no confusion later. I am not about to argue whether there are racist people in Skyrim. If that is what you are arguing, then there is nothing to discuss. There absolutely are racist people in Windhill. For example, in a quest where you are tasked with convincing a local business owner named Torbjorn Shattershield to pay his Argonian employees a fair wage, you get the following dialogue.
Those boots aren't worth the septims I do pay them. I'm not giving them coin I could give to good Nord workers.
There is no way you can salvage that line. That is pure racism, and there is simply no way around it. However, he is not a Stormcloak soldier, nor does he hold any position of government, policy-making or otherwise, in the hold of Eastmarch. As a result, he does not contribute to the questions of whether the Stormcloak Army or Ulfric Stormcloak himself are racist. When we examine acts of supposed racism, we have to be certain that we are looking at Stormcloak soldiers or the actions of Ulfric Stormcloak himself, or at the very least, a policy-making Eastmarch government official like Yorleaf. So, does the Stormcloak Army advance a racist agenda? To that, I can very easily say no. Frankly, I have seen zero evidence that the Stormcloaks advance any sort of racist agenda. In fact, no NPC in the game even suggests that the Stormcloak Army are Nord elitists, not even by those who play the race card in the game. For example, when you speak to Scout's mini-marshes for the aforementioned wage negotiation, you get this line.
The Nords don't appreciate us. So what? I don't appreciate them right back.
Notice, he said Nords, not Stormcloaks. That brings us back to our aforementioned example of how citizens of Windhelm being racist do not necessarily cause the Stormcloaks to be racist. The only tangible accusation I have ever heard anyone make for Stormcloaks being racist is that they only want Nord soldiers to join their ranks. This is the closest I have ever heard anyone come to making a tangible argument instead of simply slapping the vague generalization of racist onto the Stormcloak Army while giving no details whatsoever. So that begs the question, does the Stormcloak Army only allow Nords into their ranks? The short answer is no. While it is true that the only Stormcloak soldiers you find in the game are Nords, the notion that only Nords are even allowed to join the Stormcloaks is demonstrably false. This is evidenced by the fact that you, the player, can join the Stormcloaks if you wish, regardless of your race.
You've come to the right place then. Speak with them. I'm always looking for able fighters. Seems we're all branded villains these days. So long as your past stays in the past, and you fight for me with honor and integrity, we'll welcome you into our ranks.
Now, some of you might reasonably respond by saying, well, that's just gameplay being prioritized over lore. So you can still do all the quests and complete the game in one go without having to start a new game. Except it absolutely isn't that. This is clearly supposed to be happening in lore. This is evidenced by two things that happen when you join the Stormcloaks. The first is that you can actually ask Galmar Stonefist about his alleged Nord exclusivity, and he actually shoots it down.
Tell me, why does an elf want to fight for Skyrim? You mistake me. I'm not saying no, just wondering about your intentions.
You can remove that line from the game entirely and never realize anything is missing because it doesn't have any effect on the game. So why even put it there in the first place? I can only think of one purpose Bethesda might have had for writing that line, and that was for the express purpose of quelling the suspicion that the Stormcloaks only take Nords. Why else would that line exist? The second piece of evidence comes when you are forced to travel to Serpentstone Island to kill an ice wraith as part of your initiation into the army.
I'm sending you to Serpentstone Island. You kill an ice wraith out there, and I'll have all the proof I need about you.
If Bethesda wanted to give Nords an advantage when it comes to joining the Stormcloaks over any other race, then Bethesda could very easily have allowed a Nord player to join the Stormcloaks without having to do that initiation. But instead, Galmar requires you to go and kill that ice wraith, even if you are a Nord. Okay, some of you are thinking, Bethesda was just being lazy. It requires less work to not take note of the player's race and adjust the quests accordingly. Well, first of all, shut up. Making a game world as vast as Skyrim and writing hundreds of hours of quest content is the complete opposite of lazy. Second, as I pointed out a moment ago, Bethesda did indeed take note of the player's race and incorporated that into the dialogue with Galmar. You can't have it both ways. Besides, this game does indeed have minor initiation quests in it that you can skip if you are the correct race. Specifically, the Orc Stronghold initiation quest. If you walk up to the Orc Stronghold as an orc, they will let you in automatically.
Welcome, child of Malakath. Your kin bids you welcome to our stronghold.
But if you are any other race and haven't already earned your Bloodkin status, you have to retrieve the Forge Master's fingers for one of the strongholds before they will allow you to trade with them.
Halt, Outlander! By the code of Malakath, this stronghold belongs to the orcs. Your kind are unwelcome.
So which is it? Is Bethesda simply too lazy to exempt you from an initiation quest if you're the correct race? Or are they willing to take note of that and allow you to skip an initiation if you're the right race, but simply didn't do so with the Stormcloak Army because they wanted the Stormcloaks to be equal opportunity employers despite the rumor that they're Nord exclusive? And if you're going to argue that they simply got lazy on the Stormcloak quest, but actually decided to put in the effort to make the world more believable when it comes to the Orc Strongholds, well then, at that point, you're just grasping at straws. Unless you can show me some behind-the-scenes development problems, some actual direct evidence that actually led to this anomaly in the game design, then I say the burden of proof falls to you to show that the effort put into these quests is so inconsistent. In fact, not only do I see no evidence that the Stormcloak Army is racist, but I actually see affirmative evidence to the contrary, and in a city that is initially Imperial controlled, no less. Specifically, I am talking about the city of Falkreath. Enter the general goods store in that city, and the proprietor will greet you with the following line.
Well met. Unlike my brother, I've no dislike of strangers. Met lots of them while I was a Stormcloak.
So this guy was originally a racist? And he directly credits his time in the Stormcloak Army as having cured his racism. Honestly, what more do you need? So that hopefully puts the kibosh on the notion that the Stormcloak Army is racist. But what about Ulfric Stormcloak himself? Unlike the Stormcloak Army, we actually have a handful of pieces of evidence in-game to suggest that Ulfric might have a hint of racism in his personality. The first major piece of evidence we get in support of this theory comes from Windhelm Thane Brunwolf Freewinter. Aside from his generic quibs about Ulfric not trusting outsiders and blah blah blah, he gives the following tangible piece of detail to support his accusations.
Whenever a group of marauders attack a Nord village, Ulfric is the first to sound the horn and send the men. When a group of Dark Elf refugees gets ambushed, a group of Argonians or a Khajiit caravan, no troops, no investigation, nothing.
Now see, that's something I can actually respond to. That's something specific that I can go out and research and verify if it's true or not, instead of him just throwing around the word racist without giving anything to back up his claim. Good for you, Brunwolf. However, this line is inherently suspect. Why? Because, well, aside from the Orc Stronghold of Narzlbur, are there any towns or villages in the whole of Eastmarch that aren't majority Nord? It is important that we limit our focus to Eastmarch, because unless and until Ulfric gets appointed to High King of Skyrim, he cannot and should not be expected to extend his sovereignty 1 inch beyond his jurisdiction. So, how can Ulfric turn a blind eye to a Dark Elf village being attacked inside his jurisdiction if there are no Dark Elf villages to be attacked in the first place? The only way Brunwolf's statement makes any sense is if we accept that there are towns or villages in Eastmarch that simply aren't present in-game. But I find that to be a hard pill to swallow. We're not simply talking about downsizing for the sake of hardware limitations here. I can accept that the in-lore distance between Windhelm and Riften is much bigger than what we find in-game. I can accept that the population of Windhelm is bigger in lore than what we find in-game. But I find it a much harder pill to swallow that there are entire towns and villages that are omitted from the game world completely, despite having some historicity to them in the lore. At the very least, I would want to see some kind of mention about these towns or villages that I can't visit, like them being mentioned in a book somewhere, or having some NPC say that he just visited the place. So, I'm going to call BS on Brunwolf's complaints that Dark Elf and Argonian villages are not being protected by Ulfric. But what about the Orc Stronghold of Narzlbur? Probably the only non-Nord village in Eastmarch that we can actually visit in-game. Well, to that I say, why should Ulfric bend over backwards to protect them when they have made it perfectly clear that they don't want anyone else's help unless they're bloodkin?
Here we are free to live as Malakath intended, away from the prying eyes of the nords. We won't kill you, Outlander. We don't want you here. Remember that.
So all in all, I call BS on Brunwolf's complaints that non-Nord villages that get attacked get ignored by Ulfric. The next piece of evidence we have that Ulfric is personally racist is the fact that he has issued some legally sanctioned racial segregation in the city, forcing Argonians to live on the docks and the Dark Elves to live in the Grey Quarter. Now, while I could understand how this could be taken the wrong way, we also have to understand that Ulfric may have his reasons for doing that, and those reasons may not necessarily be purely racist. Bear in mind that the dialogue simply does not exist in-game to ask Ulfric directly why he issued that decree. So at this point, we are merely speculating. However, one reason I can think of that actually kind of makes a modicum of sense is that he is doing that for safety rather than bigotry. Bear in mind that the guards of Windhelm are stretched so thinly by the war that they can't even investigate a repeated serial killing, even when there's a literal trail of blood leading directly to the killer's lair.
We're stretched thin as it is with the war. Nobody has the time to spend on this. Not
unpleasant, but it's the truth.
So if they are that thinly stretched, do you honestly think they would be able to adequately put down a race riot should one break out? As I pointed out before, there are indeed racist people in Windhelm, even if Ulfric himself isn't one of them. And as soon as you walk into the city for the first time, you can clearly see how intense the racial tensions are.
You come here where you're not wanted. Eat our food, you pollute our city with your stink, and you refuse to help the Stormcloaks.
But we haven't taken a side because it's not our fight.
Hey, maybe the reason these Greyskins don't help in the war is because they're Imperial spies.
Imperial spies? You can't be serious.
Maybe we'll pay you a visit tonight, little spy. We got ways of finding out what you really are.
For that matter, even if a race riot could be suppressed by the existing Windhelm guards, such a riot would probably still have a buttload of casualties and property damage. Just look at some of the riots in the real world that happen even when the US government isn't stretched thin by war, like the Los Angeles 1990 riots or the 2014 Ferguson, Missouri riots. When you look at it from that perspective, don't you think it's in everyone's best interests to prevent race riots from breaking out in the first place? Separate the combustible elements so as to minimize the likelihood of having a race riot ever break out to begin with. Sure, from the Dark Elves and Argonians' point of view, maybe the best solution is that the nords of that city should just get over themselves. And while I agree that that might be the ideal solution, it doesn't look like that's gonna happen anytime soon. Don't you think we need to be a bit realistic here? Besides, even if we completely run with the idea that Ulfric is segregating the people of Windhelm across racial lines out of pure racism rather than an interest in public safety, that only takes us so far when it comes to the Dunmers and Argonians' plights. Maybe they might be forced to live in the Grey Quarter, but once they are there, is there anything stopping the Dark Elves from sprucing the place up a bit? Grey Quarter resident Ambaris Rendar, proprietor of the New Guinness Corner Club, has decorated his bar, and with pro-imperial banisters no less, and he doesn't get arrested for that. So clearly this racial segregation statute does not prohibit the decorating of their homes. So whether the Grey Quarter stays a slum or not seems entirely within the Dark Elves' control. Do they have the means to spruce up the Grey Quarter a bit and make it less of a slum, but choose not to so they can continue to play the race card? Now, maybe the Dark Elves have a reason they can't decorate their homes and make them less of a slum. And maybe we just aren't told that reason in-game. But then again, if we accept that possibility, we also have to accept the possibility that Ulfric Stormcloak may have had a legitimate reason for issuing the segregation in the first place. It is completely unfair to give one side of the story the benefit of the doubt, but not the other. And this transitions me into my final main point of this video. If anyone is racist in this whole ordeal, I think it's the Dark Elves, not the Nords. What? Yeah, people who view the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind through rose-tinted nostalgic goggles often like to forget that the Dark Elves of Vardenfell were xenophobic in the extreme. As Shoddy Cast once put it, as a society, the Dark Elves view humans as no better than beasts, fit only for servitude. In fact, they were so racist that they were the only province in Tamriel to practice slavery in the Third Era. So when Red Mountain erupted in the 5th year of the 4th Era, and the Dark Elves were forced to flee Morrowind and take up shelter elsewhere in Tamriel, what exactly happened when they arrived? Were they honest natural disaster refugees who were just given a raw deal when they sought sanctuary in their neighbor's territory? Or did they take their self-entitled attitudes with them to Skyrim, feel like they were entitled to sanctuary, and then were in for a rude awakening when the sovereign people of their new homes weren't gonna put up with their crap? The Red Year happened 195 years before the events of Skyrim, and 2 centuries of rude awakening would be a very humbling experience and can take its toll on the residents. So the Dark Elves' current attitudes cannot be taken as definitive proof of how they acted when they first came to Skyrim. By contrast, the events of Morrowind took place a comparatively short 11 years before the Red Year, so the Dark Elves' attitudes during the events of that game are a much closer indication of how they likely acted when they first came to Skyrim. Or, as Windhelm High Elf Naranye put it,
the Dark Elves are too proud and naive to understand the way things truly are, and so they continue to dwell in that slum.
As for me, I would prefer this type of greeting.
Only the foolish or the courageous approach a Jarl without summons.
Over this type of greeting.
Speak quickly, Outlander, or go away.
Any day of the week. So that does it for today's video. So what do you guys think? Are the Stormcloaks and or Ulfric Stormcloak himself racist? Let me know down in the comments. Also, take a look at some of the other Let's Plays that I'm doing at the time. And if you think I have the potential to become a great YouTuber, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, however, I'm Acerthorn, and I'll see you guys later.